I feel like I'm getting hammered.
Caitlyn Clark walked onto the professional stage with a skill set that felt almost otherworldly. She could bury half-court shots with a mere flick of the wrist, dish out pinpoint passes that confounded defenders, and electrify the crowd simply by stepping over the mid-court line. From the moment she joined the WNBA, fans couldn't get enough of her fearless style. Yet beneath that excitement was a darker reality. Clark spent her rookie season enduring a series of brutal cheap shots, borderline fouls, and physical play that often left her on the hardwood. Each time she recovered, she flashed her trademark competitive fire. But viewers couldn't help wondering if all that rough treatment would take a toll. Whispers circulated that certain teams were going out of their way to knock her off her game. Was it frustration that fueled them, or jealousy of her rapid rise? One thing was certain, the Indiana Fever would not let their young star continue as a target without serious backup. No one could deny that Clark was singled out. While rookies often face an initiation of sorts in a league full of veterans, her treatment seemed to go well beyond the usual welcome. Opponents crowded her in the lane, swung arms on shot attempts, and occasionally resorted to a nasty elbow or forearm, disguised as an attempt at the ball. It felt personal, and fans across social media lit up with theories about why she was getting so much heat. Some said she was too flashy. Others believed she talked too much. A handful of critics felt that Clark's three-point celebrations rubbed them the wrong way. But the real kicker was how often these hits lacked any legitimate basketball purpose. They weren't mere byproducts of good defense, but calculated attempts to send a message. That message, as many speculated, was that no matter how talented or popular you are, you must be humbled. Yet Clark handled it all with a sense of poise that shocked her detractors and fueled her supporters. She took elbows to the ribs, hits to the face, and even a few low-bridge collisions that could have ended badly. Every time she brushed herself off, adjusted her ponytail, and jogged back into position. There were moments when fans watched in disbelief, mouths open, waiting for referees to step in more aggressively. Some calls were made, many weren't. And through it all, Clark refused to let these tactics break her focus. But the Indiana Fever front office saw all they needed to see. They knew that if she kept being battered like that without protection, it might eventually wear her down. During the offseason, the Fever were determined not just to improve, but to ensure their rising star was surrounded by teammates who would step in the second anyone laid a cheap hand on her. While other squads might have scrambled for a single defensive big or an extra shooter, Indiana was on a mission. Find multiple players who blend skill, intensity, and a willingness to stand up for a teammate. The result was a trifecta of tough, no-nonsense veterans who had gained their own share of respect and occasionally fear throughout the league. Rumors swirled that the front office was evaluating personalities as much as they were evaluating stats. If someone was known for backing down from conflict, they probably weren't on Indiana's target list. From the moment Natasha Howard's name popped up, fans buzzed with excitement. Howard wasn't just any free agent. She was a three-time WNBA champion, a former Defensive Player of the Year, and a proven force who made life miserable for any opponent who dared to challenge her in the paint. Standing at 6'2" with a wingspan that seemed to stretch beyond logic, she specialized in blocking shots, intercepting passes, and physically wearing down whoever she guarded. Plenty of players can rack up blocks or steals, but Howard had the intangible presence that made players think twice before driving the lane. She carried herself with the kind of swagger that stated, "Mess with my teammate and you mess with me."
Your current team has made some interesting moves the last few days. How do you feel about what your roster suddenly looks like?
I'm excited. Obviously, we made some great moves. I think, Kelly and Amber and the whole, Fever organization are, they're helping us win now. And I think that's really important. I think they're putting really good pieces together that are gonna, complement each other really, really well.
One of the biggest draws for the Fever was Howard's mix of experience and leadership. She understood not only the physical dimensions of the game, but also how to handle the mental warfare that unfolds in critical moments. In the playoffs, her track record spoke volumes. More than 50 postseason games played, multiple championship runs, and the ability to adapt as soon as an opponent found any crack in her team's strategy. For a young roster like the Fever, that kind of veteran savvy was invaluable. As soon as Howard signed, Indiana's social media lit up with fans celebrating this new enforcer who would effectively declare the lane off limits to anyone daring to tee off on Clark. But that wasn't the only jaw-dropping move. The Fever had their eyes on Sophie Cunningham, a player renowned for her sharpshooting and an uncanny knack for getting under opponents' skin. Cunningham was more than just a sniper from long range. She was fiery, fearless, and often found herself in the middle of on-court skirmishes. Not because she was dirty, but because she refused to be intimidated by size or reputation. When challenged, she rarely stepped back. Instead, she squared up, chin high, ready for whatever came next. That attitude resonated perfectly with Indiana's vision for a stronger, more unified team that would never let one of their own fight solo battles. Cunningham's willingness to stand up for her squad went hand in hand with her ability to drain threes at a consistent clip. The notion of spacing the floor around a dynamic playmaker like Clark was already enticing. Add in Kelsey Mitchell's shooting, and suddenly the defense has to respect every corner of the court. Throw Cunningham into the mix, and you get a perimeter trifecta that threatens to bury teams in a barrage of threes if they even momentarily lose focus. Opponents who once threw their entire defensive scheme at Clark to stop her might reconsider when they see Sophie calmly waiting for an outlet pass, fingers curled around the ball, ready to fire. Of course, the biggest talking point around Cunningham was her attitude. She'd taken hits herself, gotten back up, and smirked in the face of players who tried to bully her. Video clips circulated online of her tangling with bigger opponents, often laughing off contact that would send other players reeling. For those worried about Clark facing more borderline fouls, the addition of Cunningham felt like a godsend. The next time someone tried to leave a bruise on Clark, it wouldn't just be Clark responding. Cunningham would be right there, giving whoever dared cross that line a quick reminder that the Fever had no tolerance for that brand of physical intimidation anymore. As if Howard and Cunningham weren't enough, the Fever secured one more major piece, DeWanna Bonner. And this was the moment that everyone realized Indiana was not just patching holes, they were building a legitimate threat for the championship. Bonner brought rings, all-star appearances, and a multifaceted skill set that let her play both inside and out. She could attack the basket, launch from distance, and defend multiple positions. More importantly, she radiated confidence that younger players naturally gravitated toward. In interviews, she openly talked about the thrill of teaming up with rising talents like Clark and Aaliyah Boston. Bonner wasn't just there to play out her final years in comfort. She intended to push the Fever to the top of the standings and show them what it took to become winners in the postseason. Together, these three acquisitions changed the conversation around the Fever. For too long, the storyline had been about a team with potential that couldn't quite piece everything together. Clark was a highlight machine, Kelsey Mitchell was an underrated star, and Aaliyah Boston offered endless upside in the paint. But the team lacked a certain grittiness that all championship squads need. The kind that sets a hard screen when necessary, that gets in an opponent's face after a questionable foul, and that never backs down when the game is on the line. In one fell swoop, Indiana addressed that need 3 times over. Last season, fans had grown increasingly frustrated as they watched Clark get hammered game after game. In some corners, people speculated that if she didn't receive some sort of protection, her career might follow a tragic arc of untapped potential, overshadowed by injuries or constant caution on the floor. The front office, the coaching staff, and even her teammates were keenly aware of the chatter. Their solution was loud and clear. Bring in players who would ensure that Bullies learned the hard way. Clark was off limits to dirty play. That's not to say the Fever's new signings are looking to start brawls every night. On the contrary, each is a skilled contributor determined to win through teamwork and discipline. But there's a big difference between being physically dominant in a clean, competitive way and letting a star rookie get knocked around without consequences. Natasha Howard's presence in the lane is like an early warning system for anyone thinking about targeting Clark at the rim. Sophie Cunningham's eagle-eyed shot from the perimeter doubles as a psychological threat. She'll hustle to pick someone off if they cross a line with her point guard. DeWanna Bonner's veteran savvy means she knows exactly when to step in and when to stand back, balancing the team's energy with her own. Around the league, the reaction to Indiana's offseason changes has been intriguing. Some teams quietly respect the moves, recognizing that a once inexperienced squad is now stacked with potent weapons. Others might be bracing themselves for a season of payback, worried that they could see retribution for last year's cheap shots. Rivalries could intensify, especially considering how certain teams seem to relish punishing Clark physically. If they attempt the same tactics now, they'll likely come face-to-face with Howard or Cunningham, neither of whom is known for politely declining an invitation to push back. Meanwhile, Clark herself has been unusually reserved in discussing these changes. In the past, she openly talked about how she refused to let physical intimidation derail her game. Now, she simply smiles and mentions that she's excited about the new lineup. Fans interpret that as a sign she knows exactly how drastic these signings could be for her style of play. No longer will she have to endure the frustration of fighting through repeated hits from big forwards without help. She can focus on what she does best, lighting up the scoreboard, firing off jaw-dropping passes, and igniting the crowd with her flair for the dramatic. Some corners of social media wonder if Clark will adjust her approach now that she has protective enforcers on the floor. Will she amp up her aggression, drive into the paint more frequently, and challenge would-be defenders to try their luck? Or will she keep things balanced, using the newfound spacing from Cunningham and Bonner to stretch defenses beyond their comfort zone? Either way, it's going to be a nightmare for anyone trying to scout Indiana this season. A squad that was once reliant on a few bright stars now looks like a deep, multifaceted threat that can beat you in multiple ways. The synergy between Clark and Aaliyah Boston also stands to benefit from these acquisitions. Last season, the two showed flashes of remarkable chemistry. Boston commanded the paint, while Clark orchestrated the offense. Yet there were times when the game became so physical that Clark couldn't fully leverage Boston's inside presence or her own perimeter wizardry. With Howard able to assist Boston in patrolling the paint, the front court matchups get even more interesting. Opponents who were once confident about manhandling the Fever's interior will now contend with a defensive fortress anchored by two bigs who can block shots and crash the boards. And let's not forget the intangible factor of morale. When a team sees that their star isn't alone, that new veterans have arrived with the explicit goal of elevating everyone's game, the entire locker room energy shifts. Bonner, in particular, brings extensive playoff wisdom. She's been in the trenches of postseason battles and knows how critical it is for younger players to maintain composure when everything's on the line. In those tense final minutes, her calm but assertive presence can keep the Fever from crumbling under pressure. The culture in Indiana is transforming from a hopeful, let's see what happens vibe into an unapologetic, we're here to win attitude. Yet for all the excitement, questions remain. Can Howard, Cunningham, and Bonner integrate seamlessly without disrupting the rhythm that Clark and Mitchell established? Will too many leaders clash, or will they unify under a shared objective of protecting Clark and pushing the team to new heights? There's also the matter of expectation. Fans are hyped, ticket sales are surging, and the media is paying closer attention than ever. If the Fever hit a rough patch early, skeptics might come out of the woodwork to claim these signings were overhyped. The real test will come in the thick of the season, when injuries, scheduling challenges, and heightened competition force Indiana to see just how strong their unity is. Looking around at the rest of the WNBA, one of the subplots to watch is how teams that used to bully Clark might shift their approach. Will they continue to try muscle tactics? Or will they switch to more cunning defensive schemes now that they know they can't just pound her into submission? The Chicago Sky, singled out by many for dishing out some of the harshest hits, could find themselves in the center of a brand new rivalry with the Fever. If they try those same tactics again, you can bet Howard and Cunningham will have something to say about it. All these intrigues set the stage for a high-stakes season that feels less like a typical second year for a promising rookie and more like the coming-of-age moment for a franchise tired of rebuilding. The Fever have effectively signaled that they won't tolerate half measures. They're not content to fight for a lower playoff seed. They want to be in the conversation for a championship right now. While no one can guarantee success in a league where parity is often razor-thin, the moves Indiana made are about as strong as it gets for an organization that recognized both the emotional and physical need to defend its star. Clark, of course, remains the centerpiece of this conversation. She's the generational talent, the marketing juggernaut, and the unstoppable force who turned casual fans into loyal WNBA viewers. The heartbreaking part of last season was seeing her battered in ways that went well beyond standard physical play. That's why the presence of these enforcers is so monumental. It's not merely about brute strength, it's about ensuring that Clark can flourish in the role she was born to play. If she can avoid being pounded to the floor on every other drive, her full range of talents might finally be unleashed for an entire season. Talk to any Fever fan, and they'll tell you this transformation is long overdue. Indiana had flashes of brilliance last year, close games that they nearly pulled off, highlight reels of Clark's mesmerizing skill, Boston's dominance in the paint, and Mitchell's sweet shooting stroke. Yet each time, they fell just short of turning that potential into consistent success. The conclusion many reached was that they lacked a hardened edge, a steel backbone that refused to yield under punishing defense. Now that backbone is here in triplicate. The locker room dynamic has already changed, with players posting pictures together, exuding confidence in interviews, and speaking openly about championship aspirations. For fans of women's basketball as a whole, there's an added layer of excitement. Clark's popularity transcends traditional boundaries, drawing in fans who might never have tuned into a WNBA game before. Seeing her flourish without constant physical setbacks is not just important for the Fever, it's a statement that the league respects skill and won't let borderline aggression overshadow talent. Sure, physicality is part of the game, and no one is advocating a watered-down product, but when it becomes personal targeting, that crosses a line. The Fever's off-season acquisitions quietly declare, we won't let that happen anymore. So where does this all lead? The short answer, to a seismic shift in the WNBA's power structure. If Indiana stays healthy and these additions gel properly, they could quickly become the team no one wants to face in a playoff series. Between Clark's prolific scoring, Howard's suffocating defense, Cunningham's fearless hustle, Bonner's championship experience, Boston's post presence, and Mitchell's shooting, there's little that this group can't do on the court. Each player complements the other, and their combined toughness promises to snuff out the intimidation tactics that plagued Clark last year. Of course, nothing is guaranteed. Injuries happen, chemistry sometimes takes time, and the rest of the league isn't going to roll over just because Indiana made a few blockbuster moves. But from a storyline perspective, you couldn't ask for a better arc. One of the game's most exciting talents was pushed around in her rookie season. The team recognized the risk of letting that continue, and they responded by surrounding her with players who refused to let that injustice persist. It's an evolution that's both uplifting and suspenseful, given how many are eager to see if it all pays off. As the new season looms, everyone with a pulse on the WNBA is circling Fever games on their calendars. There's anticipation about how Clark's style might evolve now that she doesn't need to worry about being decked on every drive. Viewers are curious to see how Cunningham channels her fiery streak, and how often she ends up in verbal or physical sparring sessions on Clark's behalf. They're also dying to see how Howard and Bonner elevate the Fever's younger core through daily practice battles and in-game leadership. For a league that's steadily growing in popularity, the drama around the Indiana Fever feels like a must-watch event. In the end, the underlying question is whether this marks the beginning of a new dynasty, or if it's merely a short-term fix to a glaring issue. Will the Fever forge a new era, carrying Clark to MVP status while contending year after year? Or will the hype fade if they fail to secure a championship in the near future? For now, all signs point to a team ready to rise above its recent disappointments and chase a title with everything it's got. One look at Clark's face when asked about the Fever's revamped lineup reveals a quiet excitement. She knows these signings mean her reign of highlight-worthy performances can continue without constant bruises and cheap fouls overshadowing her brilliance. The frustration of enduring so many hits in her rookie year might even transform into a new layer of resilience. Every time she steps onto the floor, she'll be backed by veterans who share her ambition, who have proven they can hang with the best, and who won't let anyone take liberties with their star. By the time the first tip-off arrives, the message to the rest of the league will be clear. The Indiana Fever have evolved, and they aren't messing around. Gone are the days of Clark being hammered in plain sight with minimal consequences. Gone are the days when the Fever's youthful promise fizzled under physical intimidation. Now, an army of proven champions and fearless competitors stands beside the league's most talked about young star. If last year's Bullies think they can keep up the same tactics, they're in for a rude awakening. One step out of line, and Natasha Howard is right there, arms raised, eyes fierce, sending shots back the way they came. Cross another boundary, and Sophie Cunningham will slide in, never one to shy away from a confrontation. And if the situation calls for an even steadier hand, DeWanna Bonner will use her championship pedigree to take control, guiding her teammates through the storm. For fans, it's a dream come true. Fast-paced offense, potential grudges fueling intense rivalries, and a storyline that feels ripped from a sports drama. For the Indiana Fever, it's a new identity. They aren't just underdogs hoping to grow, they're a proud contender wanting to shake up the established hierarchy. And for Caitlyn Clark, it's finally a chance to let her game speak at maximum volume without being drowned out by cheap shot artists. The cycle of repeated hacks and borderline dangerous play is over. It's time for a new era, one where skill is met with skill, and intimidation attempts are swiftly countered. So the question is, are we looking at the next big WNBA powerhouse? From the outside, it sure looks that way. The trifecta of Howard, Cunningham, and Bonner gives the team more than just talent. It gives them an edge and a protective shield around their biggest star. Clark can keep blowing minds with her limitless range and fearless drives, while Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell further enhance a roster that now oozes versatility. Opponents might still test the physical waters, but they'll soon discover that Indiana's threshold for tolerance is drastically lower this time around. As the season unfolds, keep an eye on the subtle changes. Clark taking more drives to the rim instead of relying only on her perimeter wizardry. Cunningham provoking second thoughts in defenders who previously loved to dish out contact. Howard elevating the interior defense to a level that forces teams into awkward perimeter shots. And Bonner orchestrating the overall chemistry like a seasoned conductor, leading an orchestra of young prodigies. Each game will shape the narrative of whether the Fever are truly on the brink of establishing themselves as a team of destiny. In closing, it's impossible not to be swept up in the excitement. The Indiana Fever have made it abundantly clear that they won't stand by and watch their star be pummeled. The entire WNBA is now on notice that cheap shots are no longer a viable strategy against Clark. The era of using physical intimidation to derail Indiana's future face of the league has come to an abrupt end. And if anyone doubts that, they'll likely learn the hard way when they're met at the rim by Natasha Howard, confronted by Sophie Cunningham on the perimeter, or outmaneuvered by DeWanna Bonner's veteran savvy. The final piece of advice for fans is simple. Buckle up. The Fever have turned a page and moved into a chapter brimming with high stakes, potential redemption, and the possibility of a championship run that was unimaginable just a season ago. Will they achieve the ultimate glory? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain. The days of Caitlyn Clark taking unprotected punishment on the court are gone, and a powerful statement has replaced them. Indiana is done waiting for its moment. The new roster signals an evolution in team culture, a bolstered commitment to winning, and an undeniable vow. If you come for their star player, you'll have to deal with an entire squad that's ready to fight back. Are you excited to see how this all unfolds? Share your thoughts. Keep the conversation alive and get ready, because the Indiana Fever's bold new era is about to rock the league.